Slow down. Lay your burden.
Hey, welcome to Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. How's it going? Hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving week. Had a pretty good one myself, but now time to get back going. Post-holiday funk. Busy weekend. It's 1 a.m. Well, Monday morning now. We recorded 2 new episodes today. One at my apartment, one out in Brooklyn. So it's been a lot of talking today. Good times. But love it. So this week is violinist, composer, artist, teacher, Enzima, formerly known as Meredith Ramsay. She has, done a fairly significant rebranding of her presence on the social medias and as an artist. I knew her while I was in school. She's really cool, really interesting musician, and a fantastic violinist. And go through a lot of stuff. That I haven't really covered with people before. And I was really glad to talk to her about that. Just a really cool person to talk to. There is no music on the end this week. When Enzima begins releasing singles and her EP early next year, I think she's gonna come back and do a little shorty episode, so we can hear some of her music on the show and to talk a little bit more specifically about about that, about the material that she's releasing. But for now, it's just my interview with her, which is a good one. For me, I have a concert coming up this Friday with Chelsea Symphony. That's December 4th. I also have a show on Wednesday, December 2nd, David Allen Thornton's album release show at Rockwood, 7 p.m. Really great songs. Really always love playing with him. My old roommate. And so that should be fun. More stuff coming up later in the month for myself and for the podcast. And it'll be good. So yeah. Subscribe, like, share, comment, feedback to me, whatever. Podcasty stuff. I always like to hear back. So let me know. So enjoy my interview. This week's interview. Bye.
Slow down.
It's like this cat's like the mascot for my podcast now, apparently. Just
That
is
is
always
so,
around.
It's a beautiful cat. I'm allergic to cats, but I took my medicine.
You know what?
No, it's fine. I took my medicine before I came because I was like, I bet he has a cat.
Yeah, I do.
She's beautiful.
All right, Toy, run along.
See you later. What's her name?
Toy.
Bye, Toy. Go.
Like, Toy, like singers, singing toy to each other.
Oh.
Like, yeah. The person who owns it is an opera singer. So
Oh, gosh. That's awesome.
So how's it going?
It's good. Life is good,
Yeah. So, I mean, you're musicians in general, especially classical musicians, they don't they're not particularly good or don't. We've already talked about this, like this struggle using social media,
Yeah.
and you're an interesting case because you're in kind of mid in the middle of this big rebranding of your musical self, your identity, your public identity as a violinist and as a musician, as a person that people
Yeah.
know. So, and this, you really did the shift like what, a month ago? You know, like public. I'm sure you've been
More
thinking about it.
public, yeah, like, and officially saying, this is who I am, this is what I do. Like, yeah, that was really just a month ago. A big shift.
Yeah. So what kind of pushed you in the direction of, people already kind of, excuse me, you were, when you're in school and even after that, like people knew who you were, people know who you are, even if they haven't met you.
Yeah.
Like youngish strings players are like, oh yeah, I know
that
who this
chick.
person,
I know her.
even if I haven't played with her, yeah, I know
Yeah.
who she is. So like, why take, why take your name, which is already, people already know, and
Right.
do such a radical shift?
Yeah, well, I mean, for a lot of reasons. And, honestly, the biggest one is that I've been a classical violinist for 20 years, right? Like I started when I was 4, and I've been playing classical violin pretty much my whole life. And recently, as in, within the past year, I started exploring different types of music making. And, once people see you in one way, it's hard for them to understand you in a different context, if that makes sense. So I felt the need, and talking with, like my publicist and everything, that I really needed a stronger, clear brand. So, I mean, it was huge. I go by my middle name now, which is Enzima, instead of Meredith, a new website, whole new like branding scheme, everything. And the way that I present myself in my bio, like the whole like classical stuff, it's like kind of been minimized, and it's more about my electronic, my, my racial background, my musical influences. So I'm really just trying to say, look, I'm not just a classical violinist, I'm an artist. And that whole type of transition. It's been hard though. But it also really amazing. Yeah. Hard in the sense that it's a little bit scary.
Yeah.
To just like throw yourself out there, So.
Well, I mean, when you have a fairly established public personality or just name, like it can be, you can think, well, yeah, sure, this might be a good idea, but who do I lose?
Exactly.
Who do I lose by completely changing? Where are people even going to know it's the same person, or are people going to be turned off by me taking such a strong stance with this identity?
Yeah, and some people are, they're a little bit like, they're like, why are you doing this? I don't know. I'm like, people can't even say Enzima. It's too hard, blah, blah, blah. But then there are a lot of people, I say a majority of people are incredibly supportive. But I mean, a big fear is, I make my income as primarily a classical violinist, or at least I have. And to suddenly change, it's scary. You're like, who will I lose? But I think ultimately there's a lot more to gain.
Yeah,
by this shift.
It's the idea of maybe I'll lose a few people now, but it means that
it'll pay off.
I'll gain more people down the road.
Yeah.
You have to. It's the same kind. As a musician, you're frequently in spots like that in a slightly different context, obviously, where you might take. Let's say you're taking these low-paying gigs now, and they're fine and all this stuff, but if you get stuck and you're known as the person who does all these low-paying gigs, does that like hurt you down the road? You're making your rent now, but does that keep you? Does having the short view of making your rent now keep you from really being successful later?
Yeah, I think it's just about knowing when to take the risk. And say, there are losses now, but down the road, I know and I trust it's going to work out. Like, I mean, there's really no other way to walk the life of an artist. You know, like you just have to take risks and just have no fear.
Well,
You know?
why did you decide to do this now?
Well, honestly, before I was too afraid. I've always kind of, I mean, with my name, for instance, I've always been like, I'm just not a Meredith. You know, I would like introduce myself and, you know, I'm like Meredith and people would be like, oh, you know, it's like a beautiful name, but it just doesn't, I never really felt it matched my personality and like my energy or something like that. So I've wanted to change my name, honestly, for about like 5-10 years for a while, but I just didn't have the courage to do it. But, you know, now, you know, kind of like what you're talking about, the gigs, I'm saying no to a lot more work that isn't fulfilling artistically, you know, which is a bit of a financial loss. But, you know, again, down the road, it'll pay off. And I'm going out there and making my own music, doing my own projects. Like I'm scoring a film right now. You know, I'll be recording my EP in the next few weeks. I've been singing. I've been doing all of these things, you know, and I think it's because of this push with the new rebranding. It's like inspiring me and kind of galvanizing me to do it. So
like, since we're talking about this rebranding thing, I think we should go back and talk about like the pre.
Yeah. What were you doing before?
Yeah. What were you just like this little egg in a off somewhere that hadn't finished yet?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's exactly right.
Pretty much.
So you're born and raised in the Midwest.
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh.
Best steak in America.
Steak?
Really good steak. There are more cows than people.
Well, yeah.
So we have amazing. Where are you from?
The South in general.
Right, the South, yeah.
A roundabout. So, you know, I mean, let's just put it this way. Like, the world of classical music is a predominantly, not everyone's privileged, but it's a fairly, in America, it's a lot of privileged white Americans and from other places simply because it's the privileged part comes from it being an expensive career to pursue, and there's not a whole lot of money coming in, so you have a lot of people coming from slightly better backgrounds, whatever, but not fitting. You're kind of not fitting that mold. You know, you're in Nebraska. You're not white, you know, and you're pursuing something that is overwhelmingly you know, what kind of things in your background like propelled you in that direction? I mean, that's kind of a weird roundabout way to go about asking that. I mean,
I think I understand what you're asking. You know, it's interesting because I'm mixed race. My father is from Guyana in South America. My mom is German descent, right? So, but she was born in America. So, and my parents are both professors, very educated, like, you know, middle class. And so it's interesting. I always felt like I almost fit in, but then there was, you know, my skin was just so different that I never really felt entirely comfortable in the classical community. But that said, you know, as a little girl, I started when I was 4. I always loved the violin. Like I was obsessed. I would just practice. You know, I did very well. You know, in like Allstate and that type of stuff, whatever. You know, and who knows what that means. But like, and I just loved it. And you know, growing up in Nebraska, which is a predominantly white, very conservative, not very much art, and like, you know, not very culturally aware part of the country, it was hard. And you know, there would be times when I was placed like in the middle of the orchestra, even though I was like clearly the best. I mean, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant because there are times when I know I'm not the best, but like, you know, there was a lot of racism growing up as a mixed race violinist in a predominantly white state where people don't even really care about the art. So that was a struggle. And
But they need strong players in the middle of the section
that's
too.
what they said. Oh, we need
That's
strong players
always-
in the middle and the back.
That's
It's
such like
right,
really this is an ensemble that's based on your rank.
It's like,
within.
you just don't want a black concertmaster. and most orchestras don't. We just got to keep it real. And that's a big problem. And, there's so many artists out there. And, like the Sphinx organization, we have like a lot of great classical players who are, Black and Latino, who are really challenging that. And, I applaud them for that. But that's it. I think a lot of racial reasons, I just never felt entirely welcomed in the classical field. And even though I always loved the music. And that, I think, kind of was a part of my desire to do something else. But also that desire came from within. It wasn't just a response to the climate.
Well, if you're doing something, if it's just a response, it's never gonna.
Yeah, it's gonna be
reactionary, type things have their place.
Yeah.
But that can't be the only reason you're doing something. You have to have some sort of innate desire or drive. Otherwise, it's just reacting. It ends up being a little bit shallow.
Yeah, and it's never going to be. It's like kind of like fake type of creativity. And
you have to have both.
You have to have both. So it was definitely. That's not why I'm, paving my own path as an artist. But even in lessons as a growing up and in conservatory, I would play, and my teachers were just like, "It's too much. Like why are you moving so much? Like, why are this rhythm? You're changing the rhythm, or like you're playing different notes." Like I was always a little like, it was always too much what I was doing, and I felt like growing up in the classical context, especially more as a young adult, late teen years, I always felt like there was this lid kept down on me, and it's like my energy was trying to get out of this box and container, and it wasn't quite
right.
They were like, this isn't appropriate. Honestly, like you can't play Bach with this like super wide vibrato and like all this time. Like it's just not appropriate. So I got that a lot. And I am so grateful for that, because you have to have limitations and you have to have restrictions in order to create more freely. If that makes sense? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It's a weird. There are pros and cons to both sides.
Yeah.
But like it's true. You can go off and just do something completely not off the wall, but completely out there. But you have to be grounded in something.
In the tradition, yeah.
Like the tradition, it is pretty. I feel very strongly about this, but the tradition, it has its place, but it is constricting. But you have to know how to work around it.
Yeah.
It's important to have that base, even if that base is overly conservative,
right?
Which I think definitely it is. But that allows you to like, then you can kind of poke against it and push against it and break it.
There's so many artists who are taking that tradition and just bouncing off and doing something crazy and awesome, and I think that's where I'm coming from. The tradition was great, but it was too restricting. It's too restricting for me. So, and I practice Bach every day.
Why wouldn't you?
It's some of the greatest art ever made.
It is a weird thing, it's particularly with Bach. There are so many things you can do with it, because the music is just every composer has some clunkers, but the percentage of clunkers in Bach is so low.
It's like no clunkers.
The music is so good that I feel like it's very elastic, and there's so many things you can do with it, but you do end up with people because Bach is this patriarch and over grandfather of all things of Western music. People hold him in this reverence. I actually was playing. I did for a recital. I did the first movement of the E major Bach Violin Concerto.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
Right. So I was
trombone.
Yeah, and I perform, but I did it in a master class, and I was just like playing around. I wanted to do something different and new. Nothing even that crazy. I was just going to play part of it with a mute in, like a harmon mute, which is doesn't usually get used in classical music. It's more of a big band, back alley grungy sort of thing. And this guy who is he's principal trombonist in San Francisco, he actually said to me, he's like, Bach is, this harmon mute would make it like this weird, dirty, grungy thing, and Bach is too pure for that. And I was just like, really? I mean,
yeah. You get that a lot though when it comes to Bach.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. That's kind of neither here nor there.
Good intentions. I think with people, people have good intentions, but I don't think these composers would be so restrictive with their music if they were alive today.
Well, that's something that really came into being in the early part of the 20th century, where it was like, no, this is even while orchestras still had their very specific sounds, in the 20th century, it began to be, no, this is the only way to do it. Yeah. This is how you have to do it. And then you start just replicating what's come before you.
It's just the worst. And I mean, I think it's the quickest way to, blow out an artist's flame.
Yeah.
It's just to be repeatedly told that's not musically appropriate. I mean,
there's a place for it all. I mean, there's place right. And there's markets for all of it. But like the market for the exact replication of it in the past, it's pretty crowded. But yeah, so like I was saying, it's just the market for this kind of thing that we get trained to do is very crowded. Yeah, it's very hard to break into. You can be world class and still have a hard time because there's just so many people and so many. I mean, you can get entrenched even if you're maybe not as good. Obviously, we're dealing with like a swath of people who are all incredible,
very good.
But if people on the lower end of that spectrum might be entrenched in a job for decades, and someone who's on the higher end can't get in because there's just no room.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that is also because of I don't think musicians today are being trained in a holistic way. Mm-hmm. It's like we get this amazing training in our instruments, in the repertoire, in how to perform in orchestras and chamber music. But we get out so many of my friends and they're amazing musicians. They don't know how to market themselves. They don't know how to make their own music. They don't know how to find out how to actually live as a musician in today's society. And
it's something that New York is a great place to do that. There's opportunities, blah, blah, blah. But you have, the learning curve is really steep because you take several years to figure it out, figure out the scene. Oh God, I hate using the word scene, but figure out the community and work your way into it. And then you hit, say 5 or 6 years, and you're pretty stable. Let's say that's the case. Right. But wouldn't it be better if it didn't take as long because people helped you? People generally when I talk to people want to play, people want to do stuff, but it's when you come out, you're just kind of like, I know. If you don't get out while you're in school, you're kind of like a baby coming out of the womb, and you're like, what are all these sounds? Who are all these people? How do I just get in? And it's
and I had that same feeling.
Yeah, you hit that wall and you're like, oh, what do I do now? And you figure it out. Yeah. I mean, most people who want to play and want to do music, they figure it out. But it's hard. It's long hours of of doing stuff, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, but I will say that I felt that the new school, of all the places I was thinking of going, the new school was totally awesome in that sense. I mean, I went, I took classes and found out about Ableton and electronic music, and was just like, oh shit, this is what I want to do.
Yeah,
and so I came out. I still had that, oh my gosh, I'm not in school type of feeling, but already I was started writing as soon as I got out.
Yeah.
And it's going to be on my EP, so.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I mean, talk about that specific thing of creating your own music. Like when these dogs, man. When did you like start really pushing towards that direction? Or was it something you would like always dreamed about, or did you have like things in your, while you were growing up that kind of let you know that that was what you wanted to do?
It's interesting because I didn't really realize that I could write my own music until I'm 24 now, so I was like 22. It wasn't that long ago. I had no idea I could like write my own music and create my own music. But growing up, my father is West Indian, so we listened to lots of reggae. We listened to lots of funk, lots of hip hop, lots of jazz. My mom, is into Americana and folk, and so I heard everything and I loved it all. So I've never been one of those people who only listens to one type of music. I just listen to everything. So in my music and in my like mental soundscape, I was always hearing different things, but I never realized I could write it down or I could express it. It just never occurred to me. But, after taking that class at the New School with Todd Reynolds, at the time, I kind of didn't throw myself into the class just because I was busy, masters, recital, like.
And his classes are funny because he's a very hands-off approach.
Yeah.
But if you do the work, you'll get so much out of it.
Yeah.
Because he knows
He's
so
amazing.
much. He's incredible.
But, through that class, I kind of got like a basic how to use Ableton.
Yeah.
And then I went back. I remember like it was the spring of my last year of masters, and I went back and I started looping Bach. And I was like, wait a minute, this is powerful. I took the E major partita and just started looping it. And I mean, the production was not very good because I wasn't entirely sure what I was doing. And I put it on SoundCloud, and people were messaging me and saying, I really liked what you did with Bach. Like, that was beautiful. And I was like, wow, people are enjoying this. And then from there I started, I turned Ravel's Sagan into this kind of like hip hop dance house beat. And then from there I started writing my own things. And, a lot of the pieces I write have classical influences. But they're very subtle, but I mean, so it just kind of evolved very naturally and organically, which is always, which to me feels so authentic. I was never forced. It just happened. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, here we are like talking about Bach again, but that was I also listened to that before I contacted you about this. And, it's the same thing, like taking these pieces that everyone knows. I mean, I was 15 when I bought like the Hilary Hahn recordings of all those Bach.
Those recordings changed my life.
Yeah, I mean,
she's brilliant.
Exactly. So but the point I'm making is that everyone knows those pieces.
Everyone knows it.
Even people, I'm a trombone and stuff, and I still am very familiar with the partitas and unaccompanied partitas and sonatas. But taking that and an unaccompanied piece and placing just a simple, the chord structures in Bach's unaccompanied pieces are implied.
Yeah.
Like they're, the chord structures and progressions are there.
Yeah, they're suggested.
But they're suggested, but putting something concrete under it completely changes like what it sounds like.
Yeah, 4-bar, like harmonic pattern. And it's suddenly like, oh wait, this makes way more sense for the average listener.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's not exactly what his lines are suggesting, it provides something very, like, something ear-catching.
Yeah.
And there's no beat underneath that, but it kind of feels like there is.
Yeah, it feels more accessible. I mean, it reminds me, I don't know if you listen to Max Richter. Oh, okay. So he did the same thing with the Four Seasons. And that was a bit of my inspiration. I won't but I mean, yeah, I mean, it's great if people love it, and most importantly though, it's people are listening to Bach, and they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
Maybe. So, yeah.
So when you're thinking about, when you're writing and when you're recording and when you're kind of planning where you're going, like what kind of target audience are you thinking about? Like, this is something that you kind of have to think about on some level, but like, and this kind of dovetails with the whole idea of accessibility and all of that. So like, where are you kind of pushing? Are you just like shooting for everyone?
Right. I mean, that's I think what we all want.
That'd be great. Yeah, like just everyone, all 8 billion people on Earth, every single one of them.
I mean, it's a question that I think about a lot, yet I don't think about it all. Because when I think about it, I obviously want everyone to enjoy it. And when I'm writing, I don't really have a specific demographic in mind. And sometimes when I think about having one in mind, I find that I don't write in a way that's true to myself, if that makes sense.
Well, that makes total sense.
So my music is very electronic, kind of. I mean, the Bach was one thing, but that's like a separate project. But the music on my EP is very electronic, very, beats, kind of swirly. There are vocals. So I wrote, from within, and I have no idea who's gonna like it. I mean, but one would say probably youngish, people, but I can't really answer like a specific demographic.
Well, I mean, you can't think about it. It's counterproductive to think about it too much, because then you like you said, you stop losing. You're shooting for specific people. You start writing for a specific group, and then it's not you, and then I mean, this happens with like TV shows all the time, is they try to shoot for specific demographics, and then no one ends up liking it.
So you have to just write.
Yeah.
And trust that your voice is so unique, your product is so good that people are gonna like it. And that's really where my faith is right now. Like, it's unique and it's good.
But the idea of actually being accessible to listeners is kind of like, whether you think about it demographically or not, like that's something that you definitely have to think about.
And it's something I think about a lot. Like, for instance, I finished all 5 tracks on the EP, and I have more stuff. But I'm just going to release 5 first, because it's very expensive.
Wait, you're not rich? Damn it.
I know, right? Jeez, if only. I finished, these pieces a while ago. Like, I was just doing final edits in July when I was traveling. But, this idea of accessibility, I was listening to it, and I was like, yeah, this is so cool. But I was like, I don't think people are going to get it. Because people need words. And I mean, I roll like
no.
I mean, no, I understand, like, people need, but it's kind of true, and I just want my music to be so people can get it, in different layers. There's a superficial lyrics. Then there's,
Are you saying your lyrics are superficial?
Cliche. No, they're good.
No,
there's like the words, and then there's the layer of like the melody. Then there's a layer of the harmony, and then the harmonies are often from classical music. So I wanted to have this type of depth. So I went back and I started writing lyrics for everything. So that accessibility is like number 1 for me right now. Creating something that's very good. And very, well thought out and expressive and communicative, but also something that your average listener could be like, oh, I kind of get it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard, especially when you're, as a person with a classical background and playing violin. There's so many ways you can go. there was something I was listening to the other day by a couple very established musicians, and there's it's two of them, and they played this stuff, and I wanted to like it because I know one of the people. I wanted to like it very much. I really wanted to like it, but I was having a hard time just wrapping my brain around it. I mean, I understand kind of like the importance of what they were doing and like the idea and that kind of thing, but just listening to it, I had a very hard time wanting to keep listening to it, you know? And I want someone to like, I want these people to talk me through it and be like, this is why you should like it. But without that, I'm having a hard time just hearing something that I can grab on, because I'm a person who, while I like doing weird stuff, I want something auditory that I can.
Yeah, and that speaks
grab
to you.
onto. Exactly.
Yeah.
So like talk about you said you kind of you recorded everything in July, right?
Yeah.
So you had all this stuff, and then you went back and wrote lyrics for it. So that's not something that a lot of musicians from with the background that you and I kind of have, musically. That's not something that we necessarily have any experience.
Yeah, like
I mean, we might listen to like some great lyricists or great whatever. I mean, this morning I was listening to Curtis Mayfield.
Oh yeah.
And and then going from that, listening to like the Kanye track that he samples Curtis Mayfield on, and I'm just like, powerful words.
Yeah.
Both things like very, important things, like things that are so, we listen to these great lyrics, but then writing them yourself,
it's really hard.
What was that process like? What did you struggle with? I mean,
first of all, I've always loved writing.
Mm-hmm.
I love to write, and my mother's actually a writer. She has like 5 books. I'm like, so I just love growing up. I was always writing, and I journal, and I just write a lot. So in some ways, it was actually surprisingly natural. And everything I write is autobiographical, about experiences or about places or about, so it's stuff that's very true to me. Interestingly, the part that was the hardest was I was overly wordy. So I would write these things, and then I would try singing, and it was like, it was like I was almost rapping. Like too many words, so I just had to
save that for the next
right?
for the album.
Hip-hop artist, rapper. Yeah, so that was the hardest part. Is learning how to, with just a few words, suggest something clearly.
You said, like a minute or two ago about, kind of cliche or whatever, but like, there's a difference between cliche and like taking a simple idea and like taking a strong simple idea and blowing that out. You're kind of like being self-deprecating, but
I do that a lot.
Yeah, but simplicity is and universal truths, I guess, universal ideas, things that everyone experiences. They may be simple, and some less charitable people might call it cliche, but it's something that a wide group of people can latch onto, because even if they don't share your experience, your specific experience rather, they share, they can be like, oh, well, that, this time in my life,
it's relatable,
or I'm going through this now, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think, what's interesting about writing lyrics is it's one thing on paper when you read it, but then when you add the melody and the texture and the harmony, it's like completely different. So yes, like in some level it is like when I read the lyrics, or when I really read any song lyrics, and some, even like Bob Dylan, some of these great writers, so in one sense it's like, oh, but then when you add the music and the delivery and the way their voice kind of quivers a little bit, or the way that they say a certain word, it's really just completely changes it. So yes, I was being self-deprecating to answer your question. But no, I mean, it's you're right. Like in songwriting, there has to be this kind of umbrella that a lot of people could say, oh yeah, that's true in my life. But yeah, there has to be something that these specific details, which are so unique to me.
Yeah,
or to whoever's singing.
And that makes you your own unique
exactly.
artist
So it's
and musician.
It's this interesting, like, kind of duality, I guess, in everything.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, that's a weird thing. Like, people want something that they can relate to,
Yeah.
but they also want the artist to be vulnerable and personal. It's and sometimes you can't, have it both ways. Audiences are weird like that.
Right.
Like, oh, I want this, but I want this. And if it's too much over here, then I'm going to hate it. And if it's too much over here, then I'm going to hate it. You have to, like, I think a funny and actually pretty decent example of this is probably Taylor Swift.
Right.
Because, you can like her music, you can not like her music, but she balances that universality of a lot of things that she talks about. And she adds in like this personal side, and she fosters,
she's amazing.
She is the most followed Instagram account in the world right now. But like the way she manages that is like this kind of personalness, and when it comes down to it, it's probably entirely, or at least 95% fake. But you look at these things and you're like, oh, I can relate to her. I hang out with my friends too. My friends aren't models, but I hang out with my friends and we go out and do things and we stay home and play with our cats. But but at the same time, like, her songs speak to larger things and like a heartbreak and this and that and the other thing. It's a so all of that, bringing it back to you. Because otherwise I'll just talk for, another 20 minutes about Taylor Swift, whatever. But what, there, like we were talking about this, I'm talking about this balance, when you're talking autobiographically in your lyrics, where do you find that, do you ever run into a place where you're like, oh, this is too personal? Like, how do you deal with that kind of?
Yeah. I mean, it's scary. It's absolutely terrifying because, especially as an instrumentalist my entire life, I've never, first of all, for me to actually sing is scary enough. Like, I've seen, we all sing as musicians, we sing, just because we have to sing la 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 or whatever. But like, but to actually like stand up before an audience and sing, or stand before a microphone and sing, like, that is my worst nightmare. Like, so terrifying, so vulnerable. I feel so exposed. So that alone is like scary enough. Then adding the lyrics, yeah, it's really personal. And a lot of it, I think of my students.
Okay. So you're kind of talking about like the vulnerability of like performing your own lyrics on stage, which is kind of it's a big part of your person, and you're just being like, hey, judge this.
I know.
Enjoy this. Review this. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
How do you get yourself, work yourself up to do that?
Well, I practice singing every day, and I practice singing very loudly and confidently because because I just wasn't comfortable and always felt overly exposed when I would sing. It was this very like timid, quiet, intimate voice. But I've been coaching with this amazing, she's actually an opera singer. I've been coaching with her, but I've been telling her I don't want to sound like an opera singer. I just want to sound like myself. But she's been really helping me come out and take the stage with my voice. I mean, I already do that as a violinist because I've been doing that for 20 years, so I'm trained in that. But with my voice, that's something we've been really working on pulling out. So yeah, I just practice every night.
So let's talk about some of the other stuff that you've been doing here recently. I would, I have to ask about this because I would, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. You just played with Stevie Wonder about like a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
He's doing his Songs in the Key of Life tour where he's just performing that one album for around the country. And you just played with him? Like what? Seriously? Come on, that's not even fair.
Let's just say I like woke up that day and I had no idea that was going to happen. And then I went to bed that night just like smiling, like, oh my gosh, I played with Stevie. Like it was so unexpected. I mean, the story is actually like, it's kind of funny. I was at the gym, right? I was just at the gym. I was like doing, like exercising or whatever. And I get this call and they're like, hey, we need a violinist like right now for Stevie Wonder. He's playing. And could you be here in 45 minutes? And I was like, hell yeah.
What happened to the other violinist?
I don't know if like, I don't know.
They get fired?
I have no idea because it was he was doing a bunch of like pop-up concerts. And this was the one at Central Park Summer Stage. So I really had no idea. And they just called me. And I just hopped in a cab and didn't shower and put some makeup on and like a dress and heels. And we had this awesome show. And, he just kind of, he's such a generous man and it was supposed to be just like a short little concert and he just kept going and going and going. And, Spike Lee was sitting right in front of me and I was like, I don't know what's like crazier.
What is my life right now?
Spike or like Stevie right there to my right. And it was incredible. And just, I love to improvise. There were only 3 charts in the book. And then the other songs, we were just jamming and it was awesome. And his band and the rapport with these guys he's been playing with for like decades, his band members. And it was incredible. Like, and he's such a kind, generous, humble man. And like, he was really amazing.
And one of the greatest performers of the 20th and 21st century.
Yeah, growing up, like, I listened to Stevie all the time. We would have these like epic road trips.
Yeah.
And it was Stevie and Earth, Wind and Fire. Like boom,
right.
Boom, boom,
you
boom.
think of you mentioned that you grew up listening to soul and funk. Your dad listening to that a lot. And of course, like one of those iconic, artists of those genres is Stevie Wonder. And he's been doing it since the mid 60s.
He's incredible. And seeing him live, I was like, my mind was blown even more. Like, there's one thing on the records, but he sounds even better live.
After 50 years.
It's unbelievable. And he's not a young guy anymore, but just so much energy in life. And he's so funny. And yeah, I'm #blessed.
God. Please, no. Why would you do that? At least you're #blessed from playing with Stevie Wonder and seeing him live as opposed to #blessed because you have new Uggs and a pumpkin spice latte.
Not that basic, Dan.
That's what I would say. Oh my God. That's ridiculous. So, we've covered pretty in depth, like, how you're forging your own path and then what you're doing personally as a solo artist and kind of forging a new identity for yourself. But, what's your kind of like your down in the trenches, like normal freelance life? How's,
how do I like pay my rent?
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously succeeding well enough to do this, but it's, so you kind of.
Yeah. Well, I teach. I love teaching, first of all. Like, and when I'm older, as in like 40s, 50s, whatever. Like,
when I'm like so old, like 38.
I really want to open a school, like a school for everyone, but especially for a lot of like minority kids. Like I love teaching, and I love teaching children because they are incredible. And I feel like as an adult, we miss so much of that just kind of wonder children have about music. So I teach about 5 days a week, and I love it. I have students who come to my apartment. I also teach at a really wonderful school in Manhattan, and I started a string program at 2 schools on the Upper West Side, and it's great, and the kids are wonderful.
What, you started it?
Yeah.
Well, if you started something, let's talk about it. How has this not come up yet?
I don't know you were interested in my teaching life. So,
I'm interested in what makes up you as a artist and musician.
Yeah, teaching is a huge part. I started when I was 4, and I was always so in love with my teachers. That relationship is still major in my life. So, okay, so in the West Side, I work for at PS 166 and PS 9. I work for an after-school program, and they, he said, we don't have a violin program, but we really want one. And I had just randomly subbed at the day at that school one day, and he heard me teaching and was like, we want you to start a program. So I was like, yeah, I'll start a program. So I started
After one day.
Yeah, he was
Nice.
like, you sound like, you're inspired, whatever. Who knows? Maybe he was, I don't know. But he that's what he wanted. And, he's a great man, and he has it's a great vision. And, everybody has the opportunity. They give a lot of scholarships for kids. It's a public school for kids who can't afford lessons. You work with all different types of people, which is so important. But this year, so the kids have private lessons. And this year I added a group class component. So they're, 45 minutes of playing together each week, and we're called the Metronomes. And we are, we hope to play in nursing homes and da-da-da. And then 2 years ago, I started a program out in East Elmhurst. Very, very poor, a lot of immigrants. A school that really needed a string program, and we started a violin group class for kids in 1st grade and 2nd grade, and that was also amazing. So education for me is major, and I love helping children. And the face that they all make when they first make a note on the play a note on the violin is it's priceless. And I also teach in Harlem. I teach at a preschool in Harlem. So kids who are 1 to 4, they read music. They read beats and runnings, which are quarter notes and eighth notes. And we dance, and I play Vivaldi, and it's amazing. So,
I mean, right at the top of this, we kind of touched on the idea that a lot of classical musicians just because of this is, of course, none of these are generalizations, and obviously it's not completely true across the board, but because of the expense of being a musician, a lot of times you kind of come from at least upper middle class family. It's just expensive. It's expensive programs. You play basketball, you have to pay league fees, and for sneakers, but overall it's
you just go right outside, and there's a parking lot.
It's not, there's not as much, maintenance and upkeep for some of these things. But so being able to bring music to people, and provide this teaching and instruction for kids who would otherwise not even come into contact with a violin or any kind of formal training, because a lot of these programs, these pre-collegiate programs at different, they're very expensive.
So expensive.
There's a reason that Manus Prep has a lot of kids with investment banker, Goldman Sachs and types.
Yeah, and similar zip codes, and it's just,
Yeah, so it's really, it's really special to be able to bring that to another swath of humanity that is dying for something, some sort of artistic outlet like that.
And it's really interesting to me because, these kids, I work with all different types of kids. Yes, I do work with investment banker kids.
No, of course. Well,
but I also work with kids who are on food stamps. And it's so interesting because these very different groups, there's talent everywhere. Yeah. And some of these, it's oh my gosh, if you knew how remarkable your child is, and if they can have opportunities, they could be the next concertmaster of the New York Film, even though they're poor and black and have had no idea. So I believe it is so important that somebody is out there. And, there are a lot of people doing this. There's so many great programs in the country right now, giving kids access to this. But for me to do it, it's like, I guess in some way how I believe I'm helping to make this next generation a better generation, So
you mentioned a little bit earlier that you're working on scoring a film, which something you've not done before.
Nope.
Something that's, not challenging at all, right?
It's so easy, right?
So yeah, what is this project?
So a professional friend of mine, we've worked together before. He made a film for me for my violins. I have not released it yet, but he's really great. And
what's his name?
His name is Jordan Rakes. He's a brilliant filmmaker. He lives in Brooklyn, but we interestingly went to high school together for about a year, and then he moved. Like, he kind of moved a lot growing up, and I knew his name, but I never met him. And then we finally met, and he's great, and I love his work, but. He showed me this film, and it's called Wolves, and it's kind of this about, the end of the world, and what happens to humanity. Are we good? Are we evil? And ultimately we're both, right? And
right.
It's a 30-minute film, so it's short, very beautifully done. He's entering in a lot of, international competitions. So he's like, could you score it? And I was like, how should I answer this? I just said yes. Well, I can score it.
You'd be crazy to say no.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you have to, in so many times in life, it's just, you step up and do it. I'm a musician, I'm an artist. Yeah, I can score your film.
Yeah, maybe I've never done this before. Maybe I'll have to, figure it out, but I'm not going to say no because
exactly.
That's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. So, and he wanted a sound which... Fortunately, I'm very comfortable doing. It's not this huge, John Williams type score, It's more, he wanted something kind of minimal with, lots of, it's a terrifying film. So a lot of really dark ambient sounds and, violin, layers and loops and a lot of, synth strings. And it's really cool. I'm really excited. So we're going to be actually in the studio this Thursday recording all the live instruments, and then it'll send it off to get mixed and mastered. So
nice.
Yeah.
And you get that composer credit.
A little IMBD action. So
that's awesome.
It's great.
So your EP coming out early next year.
Yeah, called I Am Ezinma.
Oh, that fits so well with
right?
all of your social media presence.
All my social media is I Am Ezinma. Website, Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah.
I had a plan.
So people can check out some of your other stuff on SoundCloud.
At I Am Ezinma.
Yeah,
it's Ezinma.
Easy INMA.
And it's silent.
And guess what? She even provides pronunciation for people on her website.
I'm so nice.
She is cool like that. So. But yeah, thanks so much for coming over.
Thank you, Dan.
Way fun. I say that about all of them. I realized recently, in the intros, I'm always like, this is such a fun episode. But come on, it is fun to talk to people. Yeah, I like what I'm doing. So, I can say that they're all fun until one happens where it's not fun.
And then you don't say it's fun.
And then I won't say anything. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, John.
And yeah.